We turn now to a new report which ranks the countries where mothers and their children are at the most and the least risk. The international nonprofit Save the Children finds Norway the healthiest for the third year in a row. The worst, the West African nation of Niger. It replaced Afghanistan, which moved up one spot from last year. The United States ranked 25th. For more on the report, we're joined by Save the Children President and CEO Carolyn Miles. Welcome, Ms. Miles.
Thank you, Gwen.
Give us a sense of what measures you're using to come up with these rankings.
Well, we looked at a wide variety of measures, really looking at things like child mortality, maternal mortality, the education of women and girls, economic empowerment of women, even the political involvement of women, because all of those give us a good indicator of the status of women in those countries, which really impacts what it's like to be a mom there. So we also looked at things like maternity leave, so all sorts of factors.
So what's the difference in the end in the rankings between the top 10 and the bottom 10?
Well, it's interesting. They're really kind of almost a mirror of each other. So all those indicators I talked with about are great for the top 10, and they're all quite poor for the bottom 10. So an example would be if we compare Norway and Niger, as you said, number 1 and number 165. So in Niger, only 1 in 3 births are attended by any kind of skilled attendant. And some of these births are actually women giving birth all by themselves, whereas in Norway, virtually every birth is attended by a skilled birth attendant. Things like education rates for girls, so about 4 years on average in Niger, 18 years in Norway. Probably, for me as a mom, the most shocking statistic actually from this year's report is that in Niger, virtually every mother will lose a child before the age of 5, will lose one of her children. So that, to me, as a mom, is a pretty shocking statistic.
It's pretty shocking.
Really across the board.
It's a pretty shocking statistics, and I wonder how much of this is also driven by malnutrition, not only involving the mothers, but also the children.
Yeah, we really looked at malnutrition this year as a huge factor and looked at hunger. 170 million kids across the world are malnourished. That's about 1 in 4 children, and that has a big impact on child health. So of the 7.5 million kids that die under the age of 5, about a third of them are malnourished. So when a child gets sick, they die from very common illnesses if they're malnourished.
I was also interested in something in the report about educational attainment for girls. That's you wouldn't think about that as having to do with health necessarily.
Well, the reason it's a key indicator in this report is that we've actually done a lot of work on this issue. The longer you keep girls in school, the longer they delay having their first child. And that child will be much healthier. A girl who has a baby at 14 is a much higher risk pregnancy and a much higher risk for that baby than if the girl waits till she's 17 or 18. And if she stays in school, it's much more likely she's going to wait until she's older. So that's why girls' education is actually so important.
I was also interested in the status of Afghanistan, which was dead last time you took this report, and now it has moved up. What happened in Afghanistan?
Well, there actually are some good bright spots in this report, and Afghanistan is one of those. Afghanistan did move up. It doesn't sound like a lot, but moving up from last to not being last anymore is big. And a lot of that was driven by education rates, actually. So the years and years that people have been working on getting girls into school is really starting to show up in terms of the health of mothers and of babies there. So
and also
that was a big change.
And also the proliferation of community health centers from 2,500 in 2008 to 22,000 now. It's a lot.
That's right, and a lot of these health centers are in the places where moms and babies do die, kind of at the end of the health system, if you will, at the end of the road, really remote areas where these moms are oftentimes giving birth at home. So having a health clinic close at hand really saves lives.
And finally, I have to ask you, why is it that the U.S. ranks 25th? You would assume if it wasn't number 1, it would at least be in the top 10 or the top 20.
Yeah, I think the number 25 for the U.S. is really surprising. Actually, the U.S. moved up 6 spots this year. So we were 30, the U.S. was 31 last year. But we still have very high rates, relatively, of maternal mortality in the country. 1 in 2,100 births result in the death of a mother. And we still have some very high rates of child mortality as well. So it's because of poverty in the United States, the big gap between health care that's available for well-off women versus very poor women. And that's really a huge gap still in the United States.
Carolyn Miles of Save the Children, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gwen.
You can find a slideshow of the best and the worst places for maternal and child health on our website.